Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and I hope everyone has been enjoying some deep powder days. Based on what I'm seeing in my feed and everyone I talk to, it's really, really good out there. I've been getting up here and there, not as much as I'd like, but I've had a few good days. As most of you know, this season is a little bit different for me and my family, but we'll be doing a White Pass trip and a Mission Ridge trip in the coming months, and the summit at Snoqualmie is always good to us and really, really convenient compared to almost everywhere else in Washington. If you're a Seattleite, it is 45 minutes door to door to get to the summit at Snoqualmie, so you really can't beat that. Another thing I'm doing much less of this season is drinking. I'm actually doing zero drinking this month. But the beautiful thing is, I still feel like I'm drinking thanks to the folks at Best Day Brewing. They sent me some of the new hazy IPA, and that, along with the Kolsch, are now my new favorites. So dry January has been great to me, but my celebratory beer drinking challenges haven't gone as planned. I'm 1-1 as Mike Doherty beat me last week. While I want to win at everything I do, I should want to lose at this one, as the goal is to spread the puffin drinkware love, and Mike will be getting his puffin in the next day or so, and he's stoked. Congrats to Mike. And guess what? That's all the bullshit I have to talk about this week, which is nice for a change. Now I can tell you about my guest this week. And it's been so long since I've had a really successful ski racer on the podcast. But this week, I have a guy who stood on 11 podiums, won 3 races, and qualified for 4 Olympics. Yes, Stephen Nyman is my guest this week, and it's a fun walk through the life of the Sundance kid turned ski racer. Before I get into it, I want to ask you to subscribe wherever you listen, tell a friend about the show. Podcasts are really hard to find, and you telling a friend really does help this show grow, so please do that for me. And finally, the most important thing that you can do for me is buy a pair of Elan skis, drink water out of a Stanley water bottle, make Best Day Brewing your choice this dry January. And speaking of dry January, stay dry with the best outerwear on the planet from Outdoor Research, and make sure your beverage is styled out with some puffin drinkware. And please, please, make sure you buy all of your gear, or at least check the prices over at Peter Glenn Ski & Sports before you buy anything. Those are the brands that make this show happen. Now it's time to talk with Stephen Nyman. You are currently sitting in your car in a parking lot. You just had a powder day, and in your own words, it was heavy and wet the way you like it. And right now you're talking to me, but you're also looking and watching to see if McCullough Schifrin is going to become the winningest all-time woman ever. Is that kind of the program of where Stephen Nyman is right now?
Oh, that's the program, man. I did have a great powder day. I went to my home mountain Sundance, and this year's been pretty wild. They've actually received more snow or more water than anyone in Utah, but they're a little lower than all the other resorts. So it's been wet. A lot of it's been water, but a lot of it has also been snow. So they got 20 inches last night, but this was mucky, man.
Northwest stuff?
Wet, thick stuff, and there's a couple slides that went off. They shut off the steeper terrain to recontrol it, and then I had to boogie. So I at least got some good turns in and got to slide around a little bit.
And Sundance is where you pretty much grew up skiing. I've never been there, but between Robert Redford, the film festival, the TV network, I've heard a lot about the place. What makes it so special?
Well, you've been to Park City, right?
Yep.
It ain't Park City. I love Park City, but in Park City, you're just kind of in the hills. Sundance, you are in high alpine, like you feel like you're in Europe. You are in the mountains. The resort's on a flank of the mountains. It's a little lower, and it's not that big. There's one high-speed quad, and then the rest are all fixed lifts, so they're slow. But there's terrain. There's really good terrain that you can scare yourself on if you want. And if it's a southern flow storm, which the majority of the stuff that's gone on this year are, it hits there more than it hits the cottonwoods. And it's good. So I like going there. And they actually finally partnered with me after all these years this year.
When you were growing up, it's like your dad was the ski school director there. You'd think they'd do something for you, being that you're the local boy done good. But I guess it finally happened for you there. But growing up there, do you know Robert Redford, and do you meet a lot of celebrities just coming in town for the film festival?
Yeah, it was wild. So we grew up on the mountain. I lived with my family on the mountain ever since I was 4 till I was 20. So Not many families lived up there. There was 3 basically that lived year round. A lot would come in and out, but you're dealing with a lot of snow. You're in the elements. And my dad ran the ski school there for 20 years. I have 3 brothers. My younger brother, Blake, was really good. He was in the movies.
Nimbus guy, yeah.
Yeah, Nimbus guy. He was Warren Miller and all that. He was actually, out of all of us, was the best ski racer. There were times when I was a kid that I was last out of my brothers. But my older brother beat me. My younger brother, Blake, beat me. And I just hid under my bed, pissed off. Swore it never would happen again. But then Blake was like, oh, I'm going to snowboard. And he just quit and get good at snowboarding. And then he was like, oh, I miss skiing. I'm going to go back to skiing. And he did ski cross and almost qualified for X Games back in the day and that. And then he did the whole freestyle thing for a long time. And then he realized he needed to make money.
Right. He was definitely one of the more creative guys out there and doing it in a different way. That whole Nimbus crew was. And he was a big name for a little while, but he had Surface behind him. And Surface wasn't the brand I think that was going to take him to the next level, because it seemed like in that free ride world, you needed like one of those big brands who are going to put a bunch of money behind you to actually have a huge career. He did really well. But for you, your whole career is about racing. But before I even get into that, you live on the mountain. And that's like as privileged as you can get, is living ski in, ski out at Sundance, which is pretty amazing. There's 3 other families that do it. Your dad's the director of the ski school. I think your mom worked in the ski school as well. But they're raising 4 boys there. It's not like you guys are getting rich at Sundance running the ski school. So is it like you have this charmed life just because of your dad's job?
Pretty much. We caretook homes. So every year or 2, we'd bounce to a new house that somebody needed to have caretaken. So we would go live there and then pack up all our stuff and move to a new home. And over the years, my parents saved up enough money to buy a lot, and they built the house. And my dad built a lot of it himself with his friends. And we were not ski in, ski out. We did not have that luxury, but we were up there, and it took 3 minutes to get to the resort. So that was cool.
Pretty amazing.
You could walk out our door and go pick around in the woods and find a lot of fun stuff up there. So it was fun, and I felt incredibly fortunate. But it was several years ago when Blake was still free skiing. My dad, he studied as an accountant, and my dad was working for Amex. And here's another thing. My grandfather was a pro baseball player back in the day for, I think, 1.5 to 2 years, threw his shoulder out. That career ended. Then my dad, he was always promoted to be around sport. My dad was raised a baseball player. He never really skied until he was 19. And it was because my dad went to my grandpa and he's like, I don't like baseball. And my grandpa was like, why are you doing it? And he's like, I like skiing. And he's like, well, go ski. And so my dad, he's like, I wanted to explore skiing. So he started skiing. There's some rad photos of him just picking around the Wasatch back in the 70s. He had buddies that would hang glide, and they built this contraption out of the hang glider, and they'd hang glide up on top of the peaks and drop their skis off up there, land, and then they'd just go hike up without their skis and go get them, and then rip down these massive peaks. And so just cool, rad pictures, and just these stretch pants with a stripe down the side, just eating pow, man. Those were the days. Nobody around.
So you were born to be in the mountains.
I guess. I love it. This is what I live for. I love it, man.
And what I thought was super interesting was that it wasn't really like you were born into ski racing. Like ski racing, it sounds like you found it differently than everybody else. Like where the Ralphs of the world are put into race programs early on, is it true that you really found a love for ski racing through NASCAR?
Yeah, Coca Cola Cup is what it was. That wasn't NASCAR back in the day, but it was very similar. It would come once or twice a year to Sundance, and we'd do that. We'd do the YSA races around Utah. When I was 16, I took it as far as I could at Sundance. We had a little local club, but Sundance actually has a rich history. Junior Benoose, Steve Benoose, Steve ran Junior Benoose, helped start Snowbird. They all came from Sundance. And when I was on the Sundance Ski Team, there's actually Alicia Stevens. She made the U.S. Ski Team. She came from Sundance. Eric Fischer, he made the U.S. Ski Team. He came from Sundance. Steve Benoose was on the U.S. Ski Team. A lot of really good guys have come out of Sundance, and a lot of people trickle through Sundance as well. So I get to experience what good skiers were all about, but I realized I'd taken it far enough at 16. I needed to go chase some better skiers, and now I could actually drive. I had a license, so I went to Park City Ski Team, and At the time, they had the World Cup up there. It was fantastic. The slope was prepared in November, and then we just had this World Cup piece to train on all year long. So a lot of really good kids from all over the nation came to Park City, and I went there, the best from Sundance, and I was on the B team, and I was getting stuff from the ski swaps. Yes, I lived this life in the mountains, but we didn't have a lot of money. I scraped to get by, and I made the best of what I had. So I went to Park City and I chipped my way from the B team to the A team. And then I was like, oh, what's this U.S. Nationals? I want to go to, I had no clue what the process was to get to the top. So I'm like, oh, okay, they'll set my goal to U.S. Nationals, and I'd do it. And then I was like, oh, I want to go to the World Juniors. And I did that, and I ended up winning that. And then there's a ski team. And it's just like, I don't want to say it fell into place. I obviously worked hard for it, but I have a love for skiing from just skiing. When I was a kid, the coaches wouldn't really show up sometimes for training, so we just go ski. And I feel like that's what gets you through the hard times, is that love for the sport when you're just getting your ass kicked by Euros and you haven't seen home in a long time,
Yeah, well, I think you're getting way ahead of us, and I'm going to take it way back, because before you even go to Park City, one thing that you do, because you've called yourself the best glider in the world before, and I think that all happens when you're at Sundance and your dad's the coach at BYU, and they spend a lot of time at Sundance. And do you see what real ski racers are? Chasing some of the Euros that come over to be on the BYU ski team, just chasing them around the mountain. And is that where you really learn to figure out the little things of how to make you go faster?
Yeah, obviously as a little kid, you don't understand physics and momentum and all that. And I just try and figure out how to go faster. And I think, what's that book? The 10,000 hour book.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, whatever that book is called. I can't remember. But I put in my 10,000 hours, I think, just around that mountain, figuring it out by touch. And somehow I do it on the World Cup. And I try and explain it to others. And I grew up as a slalom skier, so I have like a quick touch on the edge, but I also have that glide. And the way people describe gliding and ski racing is this long, slow arc, try and be soft on the snow. And I'm like, no, man, I go really straight and I kind of pop the edge and get off it quick. And I do something a little different, but obviously it's really fast.
So that's where you learn the glide, is going from the back to the front of that mountain on long cat tracks, following all the BYU racers. And if your dad is the coach at BYU, I'm guessing you're Mormon. And was being Mormon a serious thing growing up, like going to seminary and doing all the things that go along with being Mormon?
Seminary, dude. Nice.
Thank you.
You know it.
I had some Mormon friends growing up. They all definitely weren't Mormon by the time we got through junior year of high school, but they did all the stuff. Was that like it for you? I mean, did you have to wake up before school and do Mormon shit?
Yeah, I grew up Mormon. My dad, he's been a bishop several times, and I was surrounded by it. My grandfather's really into it, and my brothers, some of them are. I'm not the greatest example, but it influenced my life for sure.
I've been to Utah a few times around Halloween, and it seems like the Mormons there go more crazy about Halloween than anywhere else I've ever been in my entire life, and I'm just stereotyping that it's Mormon people. But was it like that, or is that just me imagining? But do you guys go big on Halloween?
People love Halloween around here. I think a lot of people just simply love Halloween, but maybe it's the ability to change character, simply put, I guess.
Okay. And so there's a lot of rules with that religion. Did you ever break the rules as a kid? Like, when did you become a bad example of a good Mormon?
I was a good kid for a long time. And then I was probably like 19 or 20 when I had my first drink. And that was in Alaska. It's just when I started traveling the world as a skier, I guess. Just being exposed to more that's out there. And that's just Western U.S. and Alaska. And then obviously I skied all around the entire world. So I've seen all kinds of stuff and I've taken it all in. Hey, guess what just happened? Michaela Schiffer just became the winningest ski racer woman of all time.
There we go. We get to hear that live with Steve Nyman. He is watching from his car.
Oh, no. Oh, I jumped the gun. Whoops. She is in second place after first round. Petra Vlhova is still in the starting gate. So you may have another update from me in a second.
So this is why Steve Nyman is not a commentator and he's a racer right now. Maybe he'll refine that and become a commentator later on. But what we thought was McCullough Schifrin in first place is actually McCullough Schifrin in second place. We'll see if she takes the title and becomes the all-time winningest woman in just a minute. My last Mormon question for Stephen Nyman right now is, have you ever soaked?
No, I never soaked. Sorry, man.
Well, at least you knew what I was talking about. That's great. So by the time you get into high school, I'm sure you have to be aware of the dudes up in Park City, like the Ted Liggettys and TJ Lannings and that crew. And that's probably when you realize you need to go ski with those dudes and get pushed, right?
Oh, yeah. Yes, sir. I couldn't get Ted out of bed today, though. He's too beat down. He's getting old. I guess twins takes it out of him.
Twins. He's got so much going on that he couldn't go shred with you, but we'll leave that at that. How do you get your local high school to get you out of school early to go ski with Park City? Because I think the deal is that you can join the Park City Ski Team, but you need to get up there every single day and ski with them, and you're in a public high school like in Orem or something like that. How are you able to shift that and be able to talk your way into getting out of school early?
I just basically wrote letters to him. I just said, this is what I want to do. This is my goal. I want to be an Olympian. And there was a class at the time. I think it still exists. It was called, I can't remember. It was an all-day class, though. Crap, why can't I remember this? It's been a while, 20 years. But this class, it was this hippie class. It was pretty rad. Michaela did not win. Sorry. It was this hippie class, and we'd do anything from art to English to outdoor studies. It actually gave you extra credits. In a 4-credit day, you get 5 credits. So that 5th credit of PE, I just was like, I don't need PE. This is what I do. This is how I train. Can I do 3/4 of the day, get out at lunch, jet up to Park City and train? And luckily, they had afternoon training at that time that I could just go join. And I get up there and train always in the afternoons. And it was kind of mucky, sun-soaked snow, or maybe it was refreeze too, like later in the day because it gets sun-soaked in the morning and then it freezes up at night. So my strength is on ice, actually, on the World Cup. Even though I'm from Utah, I've always been horrible in the soft snow. And maybe it came from that, but I just worked it and wrote them what my goals are and how I wanted to make it work. And they worked around my program. I definitely bent the rules a few times and said I was going to train, but I just went skiing elsewhere. Right. But I think I went to school 4 days one term. Jesus. And most of the time I was just gone.
And then when you join the Park City Ski Team, is that something that's like a big cost to your parents as well? Like, I know it's not the same thing as going to like a private race school or one of those Vermont schools that people go to, but is there a big expense to be part of that Park City team?
There is. There's a big expense for the ski team, but luckily they had a lot of scholarships that they give out. And I just applied for a lot of the scholarships and had a lot of support. I wrote a ton of individual letters to people, the Sundance community, Provo community, to donate money to me, and anyone who donated from $10 to $1,000, I write them the same letter saying thank you. And I just found a way to make it happen. Back to a story that I was telling you earlier, my brother, while he was still skiing, he asked my dad to help him with his taxes because he was an accountant.
Yep.
My brother, he made like 50 grand that year, and my dad's like, you made 50 grand? Blake's like, yeah. He's like, I raised you boys on 30 grand a year. I was like, what?
Whoa, all Dude, 4 of you?
Insane. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't want to make our situation sound bad. It was not bad at all. And we had all the opportunity in the world, but we cooked a lot of our own food. We grew a lot of our own food. We made it work. Thanks to my mom and dad.
And then you're like a total go-getter, right? Like, I mean, writing all these letters and doing all this shit that most 15, 16-year-old kids don't do for themselves. But you're getting scholarships and getting adults to let you out of school just because you're willing to put in the work on the front end. Like, you realize that hard work pays off early.
I mean, if you state your goals and you tell stories, people will support you. And if you tote them along and include them, like, people are going to they got your backs and people are all about it. So, yeah, I've been through that cycle a few times in my career.
It's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm going to start the year off with a new sponsor I'm really excited to tell you about, Best Day Brewing. Yeah, I love a good craft beer, but finally, I found a full-flavored, full-bodied, full-aromaed craft beer without the alcohol to slow me down. Because really, life is full of moments that deserve a great beer, but not the booze. and the blind taste tests I've done prove that you won't be able to tell the difference between a Best Day and your favorite IPA or Kolsch. What I really love about Best Day is that I get a low-calorie, low-sugar brew that goes perfect with driving home. And to celebrate 2023, please join me in participating in Dry January. I'm not asking any of you to quit drinking because that's not what this is all about. I just want to see if everybody can do it for a month or even a few weeks, and if you can't, well, that's another conversation. But whether you're an athlete, a desk jockey, a biker, an entrepreneur, a runner, a walker, a hiker, a skier, a snowboarder, you deserve to have your best day yet too. So next time you're at the store, pick up a 6-pack of Best Day Brewing, and if you can't find some at the store, you can always head on over to bestdaybrewing.com to get yourself a 6-pack of tasty flavor. My next sponsor is Puffin Drinkware. What's a puffin? Think a parka, a spacesuit, a life jacket for your beverage that's built with insulation technology, complete with a thermal liner for colder sips to the very last drop. Yeah, a puffin will keep your drink cold until the last drop, but it'll also make you the king or queen of whatever room or party you're in, as everyone's going to notice your puffin and start asking you questions about it. And while you're going to want to answer all of their questions about that parka or life vest or spacesuit or countless other silhouettes that Puffin creates, you and everyone else will be focused on talking about how cute your personality-infused beverage apparel is. And I want every one of you to head over to puffindrinkware.com to pick up a puffin for yourself. You need one of these. And while you're at it, buy one for a friend and have fun together. And Puffin is going to make that easier than ever for you to do. They're going to save you 20% off all Puffin orders, and all you need to do is go shopping at puffindrinkware.com, and when you head to checkout, enter the code POWELMOVEMENT, that's all lowercase, all one word, no spaces, and you will save 20% off your Puffin drinkware, and you will have the cutest drinkware in the entire planet. My final sponsor is Elan Skis, and I'm in love with both my Ripsticks 106 Black Edition and my Ripsticks 96 Black Edition. They are so fun and lively, all while remaining light and stable. And I'm not the only person who thinks these skis ski better than the competition. Both of these skis were named the editor's pick in Free Skiers magazine test this year. And combined, Elan won over 65 awards in 2022. Great products is why you're seeing more Elan skis on the hill. And making you a better skier is how they've been building a cult following here in the US. But what's really amazing about the brand is that they built a solar power plant on top of their state-of-the-art factory, which means Elan is powered by renewable energy. They've also shortened the supply chain, and now 70% of Elan's materials come from within 250 miles of their factory. And the innovative digital printing technology they're using has already saved 32 tons of volatile waste since 2016. To find out more about all things Elan, head on over to elanskis.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. When you think about when you're a kid as well, ski racing is everything to you, yes. But what other sports are you into? Because I know water skiing is something you do now. But how about skateboarding and other stuff? Were you doing that back then as well?
So I made the ski team, and a week later, I broke my leg skateboarding in Malibu or Venice or something like that in a bowl, and I had to call my coaches, and I was like this total nobody kid.
You just made the team, like on the B team.
Made the team, and they're just like, who is this guy? He just made the team. He just beat everybody in the world. And now I'm like, oh, I just broke my leg skateboarding. So they weren't stoked on that one. I skated for a bit, skated after that for a bit. Mostly in the mountains, though. Lots of mountain biking. I played some team sports. I was kind of a little hippie kid. Lots of ultimate frisbee. I played a little football, but just living in the mountains to commute down there and juggling 4 boys, I don't think my parents were up to it. So they're more like, here's a bike, go play outside.
But you were a beast. Like in high school, had you developed to be your 6'4", like 220-pound self, or did that kind of happen a little bit after high school?
I was like 6'4", 170.
Okay.
I was a beanpole.
Okay. And, you know, at that point, you're racing, it seems like you're focused mainly on slalom, which is crazy to me because it's got to be arms and elbows, I would think, everywhere. But you're doing pretty well. You're hitting 5 or 6 podiums and some top 20 finishes. By 2002, you end up with the discretionary spot on the World Junior team. Was that a total shock to you, as you're kind of newer than everybody else to racing and you're doing pretty well, but they give you that discretionary spot where it could have gone to any kid who had potential, and it's like you're just this raw big talent and they're like, hey, we're going to give it to him?
So I raced in Copper Mountain in November, and I was on K2 at the time, and I had these things were 2 years old, duct tape tips, edges missing, or not edges, bases missing. They were so fast though. And I went down and won these races. I was second and first against a lot of really legit skiers. And then K2 was all fired up, so they sent me a ton of new skis, which I'd never really received before. I always was on like a buy one, get one free program.
Do you work with the race room like Dan Harvey and Van Brassington back then?
Van the man.
He's a pretty funny dude. He hates snowboarders.
Yeah, he does. He's given me plenty of those shirts. As in working with, I'd go to Mount Hood and I'd knock on his door and he'd answer in his underwear and just be like, "Oh, here's your skis, boy." He was awesome. He was a good dude. It's funny to see around every once in a while. But I was never at the level to help design skis because later that year I switched to Fischer, and I'll tell you that story. But I got all those new skis and I went to Junior Nationals, which was out east, and it was just an ice pit. And all the new skis were not this old sandwich construction. They were this cap construction. I knew nothing about skis at the time, but they were new, so I'll use them. And I couldn't hold on ice, and I sucked. And they're like, "Oh, it was a total fluke." Then I went home, and I got back on the red skis, and I'm like, "Oh, these things are so much better." So I went to Europe, and I won some FIS races there. And they're like, "Okay, we'll name Nyman as discretion." And when I was at home in Park City, an old coach of mine who was actually Mike Day, who is Michaela's coach right now and was Bodie's coach at that time, he was like, "Steven, just try these skis." And he gave me a pair of Bodie's old Fischers, and I felt like a god. I was just training against all the Olympians, and I was super fast, and I was just like, I can do anything on these things. So I went to World Juniors, and I had these slalom stretch pants I got for $10 at the Park City Ski Swap, and I had a backwards beanie on, like one of those Billy beanies with a little brim back in the day, you know?
Visor beanie?
One of those on with on backwards with my goggles. Like I was just raw. I had an old downhill suit I chopped with scissors on the top, and I won against all these kids that are already on national teams and everything. It was Axel Svindal and Mark Berteau were on the podium with me, and I beat them all, and Axel's on the podium. He's like, "Dude, who are you?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Have you raced a World Cup?" I'm like, "No." "Europe Cup?" "No." I'm like, "I raced a couple NORAMs." Like, never did well in them either. So he was just kind of blown away. Then I went to World Cup finals in Flachau. If you win World Juniors, you get to go to World Cup finals that year. And I went to Flachau World Cup finals, and I was racing or training with like Von Groningen and Bodie and Schlopey. These guys were the top 3 GS skiers in the world at that time. And I was beating all of them, and I had no GS ranking. Like K2's GS skis were horrible.
Right. You're just a no-name there.
Who is this kid? And then I went in the slalom, and I was horrible in the first run. I was just so nervous. I was beating all of them in the slalom training too. And then horrible first run in the race, but second run, I was like, whatever. I already sucked. And I just let go and ended up 6th in the run, 15th overall, which got me World Cup points because they only give World Cup points to top 15 at finals. And that put me on the USB team from the Park City Ski Team. So rapid rise. And then I pretty much sucked in slalom since then.
Yeah, I mean, when you broke your leg, like it was a big shift in your whole ski career. You can see for like 3 years, it was DNF, DMF, 35, 39, 4, you weren't doing well. And then you look and it was like, oh shit, he did well in Super G here. Oh, he's got a 9th here. And then all of a sudden it seemed like on the speed events, you could see that everything was ramping up for you. But when you win that event, or actually not even when you win that event, when you think about gear, it was like you were skiing on K2 skis, they made you slow, and once you got on a different brand, it was a game changer for you. Have you ever had another piece of gear in your career that really was like a game-changing thing?
A few times, yeah. But I wouldn't say K2 made me slow. I've always thought like maybe because I was trying to ski fast on inferior equipment that made you like reach deeper to figure it out. And then once you actually got on something that worked, you're like, oh, this is so much easier than if you just grew up on the easy stuff. Would you actually be as good as you were? I don't know. I've always wondered that.
Yeah.
But that's the way it played out. But I'd say 2012 or 13, one of those years, I skied well. I had really fast sections, but then something was wrong. Like everybody had bailed off of Fischer speed skis. We had great slalom skis, great GS skis, cross country, obviously, and like ski jumping. And I just went to him. I'm like, you guys, something's wrong with our stuff because we're winning in everything else except downhill and Super G. Like we got to figure it out. So we tore apart the skis and we're just looking at our skis versus other skis and looking at my splits because I was like one of the only guys left on them. And anytime I was on a side hill, I'd lose a ton of time. And so we were looking, okay, our tip's actually a lot wider than most skis and our tail's skinnier, which releases out of the turn better. But when you're going across a side hill, that tip's just constantly dragging. So we designed a ski with a skinnier tip, a wider tail, and I took off there and started skiing pretty well. But then I had a lot of boot issues. Being as big as I am, like ski boots are designed basically around a person who's 5'10". A 25.5 is usually it's like the first size they make for the people. And then they just exponentially grow these things, which isn't right. They need to really like look at people's actual foot sizes to determine how thick the heel cup should be and how wide the toe box should be and all that stuff. And so I'd find like when I was in my proper boot size, a 28.5, the heel would be so big and it'd be so sloppy, but I'd go to a 27.5 and I'd be stretching that boot so much it wouldn't have the stability, especially the torsional stability that a typical boot has. And when I flex forward, it would collapse because I just have so much leverage over it. So I kept talking to Fischer about this issue. And finally, they're like, well, we used to do this in the 80s. And they just slapped some fiberglass right in front of my ankle on the outside and on the inside of the boot. And you know, when you flex your boot and it just kind of bulges out,
Yep.
you lose all transfer of energy to the tip of the ski. So they just slapped the fiberglass on there. And I was in Zermatt at a Spider photo shoot and they gave me these boots. And I'm notorious for just getting equipment and being like, this is awesome. This is awesome. I always call my technician and just rave about it. And he was like, whatever. So I got these boots and I'm at the photo shoot and I'm like, I haven't felt this transformation since those slalom skis back in the day. And I called him and I'm like, dude, this boot is real. And he's like, whatever. And we already had one camp that year in Chile and I got this new boot, went back to Chile the second camp and just was kicking everybody's ass. And he's like, whoa, you were right. I should have listened to you. And having that just gave me so much more control and I knew what the skis were going to do. I wasn't bouncing here or there and getting all wonky and downhill is not a lot of fun. You're scared, you're hesitant. So Bryce Bennett on the ski team right now, he's 6'7", and I was telling him immediately, I'm like, dude, you got to come to Fischer. We got something figured out. You got to come to Fischer. And I could just see him struggling, just overpowering his boots, getting nothing. And finally, once he went to Fischer and tried that boot, he's like, oh man, I should have listened to you 2 years ago. And he's obviously been doing pretty well. So that was the big one. And once I transferred over to that boot, I think that was 2014, I really took off and had the best years of my ski career.
So, I mean, it's safe to say that equipment is such a big part of a champion in anything, really. But on the World Cup, you could have someone who is skiing faster than everybody, beating them by a half a second, and then give them a different pair of skis, and they could be on the bottom of the pack just because it's not equal playing fields on different skis, just like, I guess, race cars?
Pretty much. And nobody really knows why they're fast or not. And they try and replicate it, and it's just not the same. It's really funny the way they go about it. The wood's always different. Where you get the plastic from is different. The way they heat and cool the skis at certain times of the year changes the way the life of the ski is. It's a scenario that I noticed that every company would have kind of these waves, and Razi would be good and everybody would go to Razi, and all of a sudden the demand was too much and the quality would go down, and so they'd bail. And Atomic was good, so they go to Atomic and they bail, and Fischer. And there are these cycles that were happening, and Head had that and they still have it. I feel like they're the company that's been able to maintain it the longest when it comes to speed skis on the World Cup Tour.
When I think about speed skis, period, it's crazy because there's so much money put into ski racing, and I don't think that's crazy because I know it's huge over in Europe. It's not as big over here. But what I don't see is many people, and given I'm in America and I don't travel to Europe that often to ski, but I don't see that many people buying race skis. And when I do see people buying race skis, it's always at a pro night where they're getting a deal on race skis. And to me, it's just weird that there's so much money put into it, but then on the sales side, there's not as much money coming out of it. And is it totally different in Europe? Are you seeing a ton of race skis on the mountain?
There's a lot of race skis sold in the US. You just don't see it because it's the kids training, racing, but then all those kids hop on their fats or mid fats and go rip after that. And you don't see that in Europe. In Europe, you see race skis everywhere. And we actually, our nanny she's friends with another nanny next to us here in Park City who's Austrian, and she knows who I am. And she came over and she's like, "Can I borrow some skis?" And she went in the garage. I mean, Utah this year is just dumb. There's just so much snow.
Right.
And she chose my wife's skinny Carvers. I'm like, "Are you sure? It's supposed to snow 2 feet tomorrow." She's like, "I do not like powder skis." I was like, right on, go have fun. So that's what they do. They're out there making the carves everywhere. And they're obviously not race skis, but they're public race skis that look like the race skis that are easy to ski. And it's a lot of fun. A lot of my friends last year in the sparse year out west, I was just like, "Dude, try these skis." And I just put them on some public carvers and they're like, "This is like a powder day every day. This is so sweet." So given the conditions, I think it's a lot of fun to have those. But in the current conditions in Utah, I haven't been on anything other than a 110 waist.
Well, that sounds like fun. And then having your neighbors, au pair or nanny or whatever you call them, recognize you or know who you are because of your skiing. And, we're not really going to dive into all your races and stuff. That's for another podcast. But I would think in the U.S., some people know who you are. I mean, in ski towns, I would think you're kind of ski town famous. Depends if it's a race ski town or not. You go to Vail, people might know who you are. But you go to Europe, everybody knows who you are. Whereas here, you look at your brother Blake, and in some ski towns, he might be more ski town famous than you were 10 years ago just because of the Nimbus shit that he was doing. But then if he goes to Europe, nobody has a clue who he is. Is that kind of how that goes?
Kind of. It's funny because some of the racers follow the free ski world, and they came up to me and they're like, "Your brother, Blake, is this your brother?" I'm like, "Yeah, it is." So they knew who he was and they're all fired up on him. But yeah, it always just depends on where you go. And Blake had a style, and that style has actually been ingrained in a lot of skiers in Sundance. So I go to Sundance and I'm like, "Oh man, Blake had some influence here." So yeah, I mean, obviously race-centric towns, Vail, Beaver Creek, out east, if you're in Stowe or Killington or wherever, you get recognized, but altogether, not all so much unless you're out on the mountain.
How about Europe, though? Do people know who you are?
Europe's funny. In Südtirol, in Italy, yes. People get fired up.
Like you feel famous.
And it's always funny to me. I'm just like, okay, cool.
But I mean, like you're walking down the street and you can feel eyes looking at you like that guy's somebody.
Yeah, you can hear him talk.
I would think that's pretty cool. But before that even happens for you, because where we've gotten, it's like you've just gotten through your broken ankle or your broken leg, whatever. You're getting back into speed events. And over the years with speed events, you're like the prototype size, I would think, for like a downhiller and Super G. When you're banging gates, being your size, I was saying it's like arms and elbows everywhere. But I would think it's a little bit more smooth and a lot more fun on the speed events. But it's also more high consequence. And how fast is the fastest you've been clocked on skis before?
In Wengen, I forgot when, 2015, 2016, somewhere around then, we broke 100, which was pretty cool. But then after that, they put a jump in the middle of the 100-mile-an-hour section. So you're doing a jump at 90, which isn't cool either. I'd rather just stick to the ground and go 100 than get out and try and jump. But yeah, we broke 100 a couple years. Now it's, I don't know, 90, 95. 2019 or 2018, I caught an edge right at the bottom of that 100-mile-an-hour chute and just my ski hooked up and I kneed myself in the face. I've never really had a concussion, and that was my first one. And I was like, whoa, dude, what just happened right there? Somehow I never got knocked out, but out of all my knees and Achilles and broken legs, that one affected me the most. Made me question what I was doing.
I would think when you have a complete lack of awareness of where you are and control, sliding on ice at 100 miles an hour, it's got to be the scariest fucking thing that could go through your mind, although you don't know anything because it's happening so fast.
I don't want to say I was like that out of it. I was waiting to hit a fence or something, and I never hit a fence. Luckily, there's a big run out there, but everything affected me. Noise affected me, memory, sleep, all that afterwards. I was pretty rocked, but I never got knocked out and was not aware of what was going on.
So I'm guessing that's probably the scariest crash that you've ever had.
No, not at all.
What's the scariest crash that you've ever had?
Garmisch 2017. I've done really well in Garmisch over the years. I was 4th, 5th, 6th. This year we had one training run and there was one jump that was pretty big, and I told the race chief. I was like, this is big. Like, you got to knock this down. And so he took it easy on the training run, and it was big on the training run. And I said, okay, next day went back up, and it was a race day because there's a race canceled prior in the year. So they slammed 2 races in a row back to back there. And I went down, and it looked like they didn't shave it. And I'm like, you need to shave this. This thing is big. And they're like, we will shave it. And so I trusted them and went in there, and I skied. I probably fell 3 stories to flat going 60, and then just smashed into a wall and did my ACL, MCL, PCL, lateral compartment. I was surprised I didn't do more than that, but I actually was fine when I landed. It was when I went into the fence. There's like a first layer of fence, the B net, and then there's the big fence, the A net.
Yep.
And I hit the B net, which slung my leg up. But then when I hit the wall, I wasn't in a good position. And I just felt my knee just go tick, 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 and just everything pop. But I didn't know it. And I was laying there, and they're like, we will get the helicopter. And I'm like, I'm fine. I'm okay. Don't get the heli. And I stood up, and my knee just folded sideways. I was like, never mind. Get the heli. I was sitting in the snow for a while. They flew me to the hospital right there in Garmisch. And I'm like laying there, and they're checking all my vitals and innards and doing all these scans. And then I'm like sitting there, and finally I'm not numb anymore. And I feel just the squish in my pants.
Oh.
And I'm like, I shit my pants. I hit so hard, I shit myself. And I'm like, I was at the nurse. I'm like, Scheiße in the Hosen. Scheiße in the Hosen. And she's like, what? I'm like, pointing down there. And so she had to wipe my ass and stuff. Cut my clothes off. That was pretty sweet.
It's time for my final sponsor break, and I'm going to start this one off with Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. Peter Glenn has been the one-stop shop for all your ski needs since 1958 and all your snowboard needs since the sport started. And they are all about getting you out on the mountain. Peter Glenn's staff is super knowledgeable and will help you get into the right gear if you're at one of their many locations. But I get it. Not everyone's going to be able to make it to one of their retail establishments, but you can still have a great shopping experience online over at peterglenn.com. The site has all the brands, all the products, and they offer free shipping on orders of $49 or more, a no-hassle return policy, and they'll price match any reputable shop on the web. So if you find a product somewhere else, head on over to Peter Glenn, and if you can't find it cheaper there, they will price match that product that you found somewhere else so you can still support me. On top of that, Peter Glenn supports cool things in snow like this podcast, Johnny Mosley, and many more things. So please support the brand that supports me and check out Peter Glenn before you buy anywhere else. My next sponsor is Stanley, an iconic Seattle brand that has been ahead of the curve since 1913. While we all know Stanley for creating that timeless green bottle that kept your grandpa's coffee hot all day long, they still do that and a whole lot more these days. They're still all about adventure, they're still all about keeping your beverages hotter or colder than any other product ever created, and they've always been the right choice when it comes to the planet. If you're still using single-use plastics for your beverages, it's time to make a change for the environment. And I'm making it easier than ever to do. I'm going to save you 30% on all products from Stanley when you head on over to stanley1913.com, buy some stuff. I highly recommend the water bottle and a set of pint glasses. And when you check out, enter the code DRINKFAST, that's all one word, all lowercase, and you'll save that 30%. My final sponsor is Outdoor Research. They've been building award-winning outerwear and gear in rainy Seattle since 1981. So for 40 years, badasses in the mountains have trusted OR gear to be the highest quality, most functional outerwear on the planet. What's exciting is that these days, the gear is still the best. You cannot compare to the quality of Outdoor Research. But when you head on over to outdoorresearch.com right now, you're going to notice some major differences. While they still make the badass technical gear you trust, they're branching out and they've hired some new designers who have their fingers on the pulse of the market to create new fits, cuts, styles, and colorways. And whether you ski or snowboard or spend your time in the park or the backcountry or the resort, Outdoor Research has something for you. And there's so much new stuff. I'm stoked because on top of their outerwear, their streetwear looks so good too. I want you to wear it all, and I'm going to make it really easy for you to do that because I'm going to save you 25% off all non-sale items over at outdoorresearch.com. And know that this code I'm about to give you, you won't be able to use it on OR Pro products, which is their military stuff. But everything else is game, and you get 25% off the best outerwear on the planet. If you've been out in the terrible conditions in OR gear, you know what I'm talking about. So when you check out at outdoorresearch.com, you're going to enter the code POWEL25. That's all capitals for Powell, the number 25, and there's no spaces in that, and you will save your 25%. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. When you're coming back from injury, you've had so many. I mean, there's knees, legs, Achilles. You like do everything twice, so you balance yourself out. But what's the hardest part about coming back? Is it like the pain and the physical work to get yourself back skiing, or more the mental part of like getting your mojo back to be like, hey, I want to go 100 miles an hour again? Because I would think when you do a knee like that, it's got to be tough to trust the knee to go that fast again.
The mental part's tough, but to me, all the confidence comes from that preparation. It comes from knowing you're capable. So if I do a lot of the work in the summer and I gain that conviction over the summer, I usually feel ready. But that year was tough. Came back, and the next year I came back was for the Olympics, and I had just podiumed at the Olympic venue in Korea. So I knew I could be fast on that course. So I worked hard for all that. I started racing in the beginning of the year, but I was so slow, and I was like, I got to refine a lot of things here because I didn't have any of that summer training. And I basically had Wengen and Kitzbühel to qualify for the Olympics. And I got to Wengen and I did okay. I was like 24th or something. And then it was Kitzbühel. This is like the Mecca, and you have to lay down here if you want to make the Olympics. And I did. I ended up 12th or 10th or 15th or something. So I qualified and I made the Olympics. This is great. Next race, the old Garmisch, which took me out the next year. And I crashed again and blew my other knee. So I missed the Olympics. And that was a punch to the nuts when you've done all that work and done everything to get back to that point, and then all of a sudden it's stripped away again. But that injury was so minimal that it was like easy to come back from the ACL, and I didn't have that fear, and I had a good next year after that. But it's because I had a good solid preparation throughout the summer, I guess.
That has to be such a bummer, though, because at that point in your career, who knows how many more Olympics you're going to qualify for. This is like your third one. I think it's the 2018 games. You've qualified for it. You're going to be one of the elder statesmen on the team. And sure as shit, you've got your spot and then you get hurt. I can imagine that being one of the more depressing things that can happen in a ski career at that age.
It was tough, but luckily my wife, she was pregnant and we had a kid, and it was something new, something exciting that was taking up my mind, I guess. If I had nothing like that, I probably would have got pretty depressed.
Yeah, and I can see a kid actually taking a lot of the thoughts away because there's so much going on with that and it's so exciting. And to have a kid, you've got to be able to pay for a kid. And to be able to pay for a kid, you have to be able to make some money. And in ski racing, I think it's interesting.
You're putting it all together.
Yeah, it's interesting in terms of pay because, like I said, in Europe, it seems so huge. In the U.S., it doesn't seem as big. And I know in the free ski world, there's not a shit ton of money going around. I mean, Blake, like you said, made 50 grand, and that was probably like a ceiling for him. And he was one of the stars of his time. But in the race world, it's a lot different in terms of pay. And are you making the majority of your money through sponsorship or through winning, or just a combination of both?
A lot's a year delayed. So if you end that year with a good ranking, you're going to get a lot of money the next year. But the majority of the money comes from doing well. And this year, I got nothing up front from Fischer. It's all
incentive
according
based
to my results, and I haven't had any results. So you can make a lot of money, and you can do really well if you win and if you have good ranking. And outside of that, I think just being a good ambassador to the sport, it's paying off for me. Being loyal to a lot of the brands and having just history there has really worked out well for me. But that loyalty to Fischer hasn't worked out quite that well this year. But I'm trying to get creative, and all the budget comes from obviously the racing budget, which you talked about is much bigger than a lot of other budgets out of those companies. But now I'm like talking to the marketing manager and trying to get creative, do ski days with Fischer. And they say that's where a lot of the sales come from, is when you get ski personalities there to ski with the dealers and the shop owners. And they say sales are much higher at those events when personalities show up. So I'm trying to make it happen the way I can. Got to get creative, man, just like Blake.
For sure. But I mean, you've had 3 wins. You've had 11 World Cup podiums. You've been on the World Cup for the past almost 20 years, which is like incredible. And in your biggest year, I mean, are you able to make a couple $100,000 being a ski racer?
Yes.
$500,000, is that realistic?
I never got to $500,000 status. I made $350,000 a few years in a row.
That's sick, man. That's
Which
so
is great.
incredible. Yeah. And then you got to think about expenses too, though. You have a tech. I think you and Bryce Bennett share a tech right now. He's very important to your success everywhere you go. Do you guys pay him out of pocket, or does the U.S. Ski Team pay him, or how does that work?
That's Fischer. A lot of the factory service comes from the factories, the brands. And if you're ranked well enough, the brands will provide you that factory service. So that's what Fischer was actually paying me this year, was the technician. That's about 250 grand a year is what they say those guys cost, to travel them all over the world, to produce the skis, to pay them their wages, give them a car, all that stuff. So in a sense, they are paying me to provide that for me, but no direct money into my pocket. But I fully understand. And I actually played the contract game a lot. Those years, like that year I got those boots, I was like, I know I'm good. Like, I'm going to be really good. And I'm going to just leverage this. And a lot of my contracts were on the whim. And I'm just like, you don't have to pay. I said this to a lot of the companies. I'm like, you don't have to pay me anything up front, but you need to double the incentives. And I think I hit 3 podiums that year. The next year I hit 5 podiums, and I knew it was coming and I knew I could be fast. So it paid off, but you got to gamble on yourself when you have that belief.
How about your travel expenses? Do you have to pay for any of that, or the U.S. Ski Team? I'm just trying to see what comes out of your pocket.
Not much in the winter, actually. The U.S. Ski Team pays for all that travel. I kind of took a page out of the cycling book, and I just rented an apartment over there. So I was actually saving the ski team money. I could have charged them and flew home back and forth, but I rented an apartment there. It was $1,200 a month for 3 months, and I wouldn't fly home. I wouldn't be jet lagged. I'd stay in the game. I'd go train more, and I'd go explore Europe. I love hitting up St. Anton or wherever the snow is, just going there and having a good time over New Year's. And if there's no snow, I'd go to Cinque Terre or Florence or whatever. There's so much history around there. So just living the European life was a lot of fun.
It's like you're a NASCAR driver. Like I said, you're going course to course, and when you get there, it's all about site prep, ski prep, getting mentally focused. And every single course has its own scary features, I'm sure. Are there ever any days where you get to the hill and you're just not feeling it? Like you get to the start gate and you're just not 100% in there, but you realize you have to go 85 miles an hour, and I would think that's when accidents happen, is when you're not fully confident. What happens on those days?
Those days, my first year was full of those days. Basically, I was horrible the year before. And then the last couple races at Mammoth Mountain, it rained and turned into a sheet of ice, and I won these 2 NORAMs. Typically, NORAMs are really soft, and I'm not that good at speed skiing in NORAMs. They're turnier and soft, and I'm not the greatest turner, and I'm not good on soft snow. So I won these NORAMs on ice in Mammoth. Got sent to the World Cup the next year because I got second place in the NORAM title race, which gave you a World Cup spot. And I was like, okay, cool. I'll try Lake Louise. I'll try Beaver Creek and Gardena. And then I'll go back to the NORAM tour and learn some more. In Lake Louise, they always have NORAMs after the World Cups up there. And they're usually soft and bally and horrible. Well, they just watered that thing down. It was a sheet of ice. And I ended up 17th. And I'd never been like top 10 at a NORAM in Lake Louise. And I was like, this is way easier. I love the World Cup. And you get nice food and you stay in the nice hotel. So then I went to Beaver Creek. I think I was 22nd, and I had ran that course the year prior and saw that I was fast compared to other guys. So I was like, okay, I could do well here. So I had some confidence. Then Val Gardena, I saw what I needed to do to win, but I piled it in. I was just young and dumb and was like, okay, I got this. Ended up winning the next year, my first World Cup. But because I had those World Cup points, they're like, well, let's keep going. So I went to Bormio, and at Bormio's like the most daunting hill on tour, in my opinion. And I did not want to go there, but I did. I ended up 27th again, top 30, collected a few points. Same at Kitzbühel, though, but there's always this legend around Kitzbühel.
You hear it's like the hardest course in the world. From a fan's perspective, that's what we hear.
Oh, exactly. It's physically Bormio because it's so long, but if you look at it aesthetically, it's the most intimidating Kitzbühel. So I'm in the start, and it's just straight down, and you just see 2 turns, and then a guy jumps off the Mouth of Folly and their arms are waving, and you're just like, oh shit, like that guy died. And then he reappears and you're like, no, he's alive. Okay. And so I'm in the start, and I'm just like, I don't really want to do this. But there's like a legend. I think it was one of the guys in the 80s was at the start, and he just said, I'm done. I can't do this, and just backed out and quit and retired there. You know, I'm just like, I don't want to be that guy that backs out and quits. I don't want stories like that being told about me. And so I went, and I ended up 24th or something. So yeah, there's those days, but I was young and dumb at that time. And now in my older age, definitely don't want to do that. And I went to Gardena a few weeks ago with my broken hand, and I was in the start gate, and I just wanted to ski this course, but there's this section, the Shaz lot, which is basically a bunch of whoop-de-doos that you're ripping through. And I had 2 close calls in the Shaw's lot, and I was like, dude, you're 40, you got 2 kids. Like, what are you doing, man?
Right.
Go home.
Well, it's taken you till 40 to say that, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
What goes through your mind when you're in the gates and there's a course hold, like a dude like yourself when you hurt your knee is getting helicoptered out and you're sitting up there and you have to wait for 25 minutes, you're getting all cold, and then it's your turn to drop in there. Does that change anything, or is it just like you just got to flip the switch and go?
There's different teams and nations, but like we're a band of brothers. Like it's a risky sport and you can die. I've had a guy die near us. David Poisson a few years ago from France just went out in the woods and slipped under the net and tree killed him. And so you know it's risky. And to have that happen, it's more like, oh, who was that? Oh no, poor Christoph Innerhofer or whoever. But 2010 or 12 or something like that, Kitzbühel, Scott McCartney, my teammate, I don't know if you've seen that crash, but he went off the final jump, and I was inspecting, and they had fencing all over the final jump, and I pulled that fence and looked, and I'm like, this isn't the most even jump. This is sketchy. But I didn't say anything. I was young. I didn't have the clout on the World Cup at that time. So the race went, and I saw him get out of balance and went off that jump. You're going about 90 off that thing into the finish area, and he caught an edge or just was a little off balance and got the wind under his skis and flipped sideways and just whipped down and whipped his head and was totally out, slid through the finish area and was just laying there convulsing. And I watched that, of course, and my mom was in the finish that year, and I'm just like, dude, why is my mom here right now?
Yeah.
And so I had to take that out of my head. You had to just trust in your abilities, trust in your preparation, and that's what we live for. That's what we train for. It's to perform in those scenarios. Like they close the mountain down for us to go as fast as possible and push our limits.
That's so cool.
It's just something that drives me, is to be able to stand in the start gate and just say, okay, this is my plan. Can I execute it? And is it good enough? And you do it.
Another thing I've kind of taken from you throughout this whole conversation is you ski best when it's a solid sheet of ice. And it sounds like these days, it might not always be a solid sheet of ice. Things get manipulated with chemicals and chemical additions to the snow. Can you tell a difference in different places when they add stuff to it?
Yeah, I can tell a difference. The biggest difference is when do you run and when do they apply the chemicals? So if they apply it and you're actually one of the first guys to run, it can be faster. If they over apply the chemicals, then that can actually like slow you down sometimes until the snow absorbs it. And it can also really ruin your skis. So you're playing a game of like, okay, do I feel comfortable? Do I feel confident? Yes, I have some fast skis. Do I want to ruin those skis? Like, do you think you're going to win? Go for it or not go for it. There's all kinds of factors you're playing in your head. But yeah, it's sketchy, that sort of refreeze via chemical. And once that gets skied over a few times and deteriorates, then it gets like really sketchy. And then they're hucking old snow back in there that's already had chemicals in it. And then you can't put more chemicals in it because then it just turns to complete rotten junk. And going over that, they usually make a good call of whether the race is going to be safe or not. But yeah, this week in Wengen, it's going to be sketchy. Looks like a lot of warm weather and rain, and they'll be throwing a lot of chemicals around to make that thing happen.
And when they have it perfect, when they have the ice that they want on the race course, and it's like you can see yourself through the ice almost, is it one of those things where your tech is putting a tune on your skis where it is like razor sharp edges, like you're going to see lacerations if a ski comes off and hits somebody?
Oh yeah, always, pretty much. I like a good sharp edge all the time. But the faster the ski, the thinner the edge. Or I should say the thinner the edge, the faster the ski. And so the skis get older and get broken in, and the more they're used, you're tuning those edges to keep them sharp, but they become really thin and they're really fast. And so you got to determine when to use those skis. Are they going to burn? Are they going to get railed on the way down the hill? That's actually how I kneed myself in the face. That 90-mile-an-hour shoot, my skis skipped out, but they had burned to where they just tracked out, and I started doing the splits, and then they hooked up, and I kneed myself in the face. It's because I took that risk to try and do well, but it backfired on me because the skis burned. So there's a lot of things you're weighing in your head of what's going to be the fastest, what's going to be the safest, what's in the future, is that going to compromise this or that race. So my technician, he's known to do well at Gardena. He lives near there, and he just, whatever he waxes there, man, is so fast. And so I think he waxes like a year in advance. I think he just knows. He's like, these skis are going to go here, and we're going to wax them, and we're going to do good because this is my hometown, you know?
Yeah.
So preparing in the future like that, it's like, okay, there's a whole game. We have 10, 11 downhills. How are we going to juggle all these races with the skis that we have? And then a wrench gets thrown in because we burn a pair of skis or break a pair of skis. And it's kind of fun in that sense of all the different things you're working and juggling.
I would think the highlight of any ski racer's career are the Olympic Games. And you've made the Olympic team 4 times. You competed in 3. We talked about the injury where you couldn't compete in the 2018 games. You were a top 20 finisher in the combined in 2006. And when you think about the Olympic Games, I'm not going to talk about them overall other than asking you about your highlights. What are the highlights of the games? What do they mean to you?
Highlights of the games are actually my first Olympic Games in 2006. At that time in the training runs, you actually vied for your position due to how you finished in the training runs. So I did well in the first training run, saw I had speed. The second training run, I skied really well, and I threw speed at the finish because they'd flip it. If you got first, you'd start 30th.
Okay.
So you kind of try and manipulate that. And I came down and I threw speed, and I still got third in that training run. And I was like, oh, man, it's on. And the downhill was on February 12th, which was my birthday. And I'm like, stars are aligning. This is mine. I just like thought about all the wrong stuff. It wasn't about my skiing or anything. I was just like, what do I do when I win? You know, I was just so overconfident in myself. And I didn't win. I messed up. I don't even know what I got. But I got happy birthday sung to me in the finish area. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But it was just that mental battle that you have to go through for the Olympics of the world is watching. And especially being that young and not competing on the world stage much was a really cool experience and something that I learned a lot from in the future to not get ahead of myself. And that Olympics, Ted Ligety won. And to run out on the finish area and hoist him up, and like the kid won. He was 2 years younger than me, you know, just like came out of nowhere. It was really cool. Vancouver was fun because that was like the home Olympics.
For sure.
And I wasn't in the greatest form at that time, but I thought I reached down and did pretty well. I think I was like 17th or something. But for the shape I was in and what was going on at that time in my life and all that, I thought I did pretty well. So I was happy with that one. And just to have like family and friends all around there. Sochi was really cool too, man. Sochi, if you could go anywhere, Sochi, that resort is insane. I don't think we're dabbing in Russia anytime soon.
You're talking about the skiing because it was like a week of powder there if you hit it right.
It's like Alaska style lift access, amazing skiing. The downhill too is just long and legit. The sheet of ice, big air, sweeping turns, super strenuous on the body. I wish I could do that one again.
Nice. And then the last Olympics that I want to talk about is the last one that we just had. It was like last year. And I'm not exactly sure what happens here, but it seemed like you were right on the bubble of making the Olympic team. And a guy that you helped train, Benjamin Alexander, he's the member of the Jamaican ski team. He ends up making the Olympic Games. And was the spot he took potentially one that could have been yours? Because I don't exactly know exactly what was going on, but there was definitely controversy around this.
Basically, the first mistake was on the U.S. ski team's part because I qualified according to their rules, but Tommy Ford, who wrecked himself the year prior in giant slalom, didn't compete that year, but had a goal to get back for the Olympics. And the prior Olympics, I was in the same situation, but they didn't give me that fortune to just have a discretionary spot. I had to earn it. And he never had to earn it. They just said, we'll give you a spot. Well, they didn't just say that. They were assessing his level, and they thought his level was good enough, which it was. So they said, we're going to put Tommy in. We're pretty sure with these reallocated spots, nobody's going to qualify, and we'll give you your spot. Then at the last second, some fishy races occurred where guys weren't ever even close to scoring the right points. All of a sudden scored the right points and got into the Olympics. I think it was like 9 guys unexpectedly qualified for the Olympics. So then those 9 spots were taken away from various nations, not just me, but a lot of other people. I think I was the second or third guy in line to get a spot, and then 9 were taken away. So, yeah, it's kind of a bummer, but that's what the Olympics are about. And honestly, my results last year weren't that up to par in my mind to be there for the Olympics. So it's fine. It was a bummer. It was definitely a punch to the gut because I knew that would be my last games.
Yeah, and it could have been the Olympics on your 40th birthday. It didn't happen, and that situation sucks, but that is what it is, and that's pretty much our podcast. But there's another segment of the podcast that I have, and I call it Inappropriate Questions. What I do here is I get someone that you know to ask 3 questions, and they can be anything. And I really don't know how you know this guy. Chris McCullough is a guy that I worked with at K2. He was a ski racer in college. Maybe you raced with him back then. I don't know. But he knows you, and he came up with 3 inappropriate questions. He also won my fantasy football league, which didn't get him the opportunity to ask inappropriate questions, but I figure I should let him get some credit. So he did win the XK2FL. So Chris is the champion, and he's going to ask you 3 inappropriate questions. And here's Chris's first question right now.
Oh, dude, I forgot about this section of your podcast.
Great.
I would have told you no earlier.
I hear that all the time. No, that is. But here we go with question number 1.
Steven, what's up, buddy? I'm glad you and Powell are talking. All right, so here's your first question for you. So globally, it's no secret that the World Cup, or the White Circus, as it's commonly referred, is far bigger in Europe than North America. And I know they got rowdy fans and iconic après bars. So I want you to tell the people about the craziest post-race night out you've had following the World Cup.
All right, so we want to find out the ex-Mormon's craziest post-race World Cup night.
Which one?
The craziest one.
I mean, there's the Londoner in Kitzbühel's pretty iconic. And I got behind the bar there one year, which was pretty fun. And they're just filling pitchers full of, you basically just slam a pitcher in somebody's face and then pound one and give them one. That was fun. But the Louisville Keller is a lot of fun in Gardena. And I was there. I can't remember what year it was, but the ceiling's pretty low there. And they have these beers called the Octo beers. And it's 8 tubes coming out of this massive stein. And you basically just hammer it down as fast as you can, 8 people at the same time. And there's a lot of bubbles behind it and a lot of puke. And anyway, I was dancing with this girl a little later that night, and I forgot how low the ceilings were, and I just threw her straight up into the ceiling. I probably concussed her pretty good. But the fun nights were before cell phones came out. I'll just say that. And I've been around that long.
You have been. You've been in the industry for a lot of technology changes. The one technology change you're around for right now is one that's really hurting you. It's called streaming any race that you want to see, because somehow no one can watch anything because whoever bought the rights can't show it correctly. And the FIS sucks when it comes to watching races online. But that's my opinion there. Let's jump into question number 2.
Nyman, I know you've got an appetite for interesting purchase decisions like that ski boat you bought that I believe ended up breaking down. And I'm curious what your most regrettable purchase is and why.
Well, I bought that thing for $3,000, but I sold it for $2,000, so I didn't lose that much. I got totally scammed out of $5,000 of crypto last year, so that was dumb.
Were you pretty pissed off at yourself?
Yes, I was pretty bummed on that one.
Yeah.
Not making the money I used to these days.
We'll go with your final inappropriate question.
Final question. So I know you're a big fan of using coconut oil rather than butter on your pancakes. So any tips for the listeners on how best to use coconut oil outside of the kitchen?
So a weird one from Chris, but we'll let it fly.
He's got tubs of coconut oil in his closet.
How do you know?
Yeah, I'm into ghee butter these days. I experiment with my cooking and ingredients, but coconut oil, honestly, it's really been helping the cracked fingernails lately. But it does have a good slipperiness to it, if that's what you're hinting toward.
All right,
Chris.
So Steven is thinking that Chris is alluding to lube, which is a weird question to ask somebody who's a friend and you're both married. But you know what? I don't care. It's 2023. I'm not going to judge anything. And that was Inappropriate Questions, and that's our podcast. And man, you've had a stellar race career. I have so many people who come on this podcast who race for a long time, and it's such a disappointment by the time we get through their race career. And I have to ask them how frustrating it is going through 30 races a year and losing 30 races a year and not getting in the top 20. But with you, you got 3 first places, you've got 11 podiums, you've been a stellar U.S. ski racer, American downhiller. I mean, Ralphs may have you in some respects, but man, you've been doing this for like 20 years. And there's something to be said for that, and it's a huge achievement for any American ski racer out there. And I thank you for telling your story, and I thank you for your time, man.
Thank you, Mike. Nice to talk to you.
So that was time with Stephen Nyman, and I love a great race story that has some wins in it. And I've had so many episodes where the race part is so frustrating for an athlete, and then they go find success outside of the race world where their passion started. For Stephen, he may have had a late start with racing, and he might not even be the best Nyman to race. But his drive to make shit happen for himself by writing letters is what initially set himself apart from his peers. Then his talent took over, and the rest is almost a 20-year World Cup career. That's the podcast. At this point, I want to ask you to review the show wherever you listen. This is supposed to help me in the algorithm. But what it really does, at least with the positive reviews, is make me feel good about myself. And these days, that's really important. So thank you for doing that. It really helps me. And thank you for listening. And please support my amazing sponsors. I only work with the best, and they are Elon Skis, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Outdoor Research, Stanley, Puffin Drinkware, and Best Day Brewing. Have a great week, everyone.